Are you thinking about getting the bottom of your boat blasted? Got a lot of years of bottom paint on the bottom and you want it gone in one fell swoop without involving weeks of standing with a sander over your head? Well, blasting's one way to do it, and there's some things you just want to know about before you decide to go that route. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. I'm sharing some tips about sandblasting based on our recent experience having both of our boats blasted. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by MantisMarine.com, maker of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models with and without a roll bar. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including anchoring gear, scuba diving accessories, and a rechargeable waterproof headlamp for hands-free lighting. Visit MantisMarine.com and see for yourself. Well, certainly, if you're going to be using your anchor, it means that you're in the water, which probably means you're dealing with some kind of bottom paint, which means at some point, you're probably going to be needing to take it all down back to gel coat or barrier coat. And that's actually where sandblasting or soda blasting or blasting in some way, shape, or form comes into play. Basically, if you want to take all of the old bottom paint off because you need to do a blister job, or because you want to change from ablative to hard, or to put on copper coat, or because just you've got way too many years of bottom paint on and they're now starting to not adhere any longer, that would be why you would want to take your bottom down to barrier coat or gel coat, depending on how long the barrier coat has been on. And yes, you can do that with a scraper. You can do it with a sander. You can do it with chemical stripper. Or you can hire it out to be blasted off by a company, either one run by the yard where you happen to be, or an outside contractor who comes in. That's certainly the fastest and easiest. It's not the cheapest, because of course when you pay somebody else to do work, it's going to cost more than doing it yourself. But there's some things that you might want to think about or be aware of before you make the decision to go ahead and sandblast your bottom. So first of all is that if you're talking about a dustless system, and that seems to be at least a current standard in the places that I was in the Chesapeake, is that you can find people who will come who do what they call dustless blasting. And that's a fancy way of saying they mix water and sand together, sand or some kind of medium together to spray onto your boat to remove the coatings. It's like adding extra grit to a pressure washer. Well, the thing is, it's not dust-free. It's dustless. There's not as much dust flying into the air as there would be if they didn't use water at all. But it doesn't quite meet with the marketing hype of, oh, the water that goes with it means it's going to trap everything and it's going to be so heavy that it falls down to the ground and no dust goes into the air. It doesn't quite work that way. So going along with that, dustless doesn't mean dust-free, is the idea that this is a very, very messy process. One thing to maybe be comforted by is that overspray that comes isn't dangerous to your paint job, but it is extremely messy and dirty. The nozzles that they have to use, they're very good at concentrating the blast. There are people who are experienced enough to kind of do it within an inch or two of your paint job without any kind of protection going on above. And we spent all last winter painting Calypso's hull. And so we were extremely nervous about this. There's about 1.5 inches of old bottom paint left along the top, but there was no problem at all with the zone being concentrated very, very effectively. But what there is a kick-up kind of effect that means that any residue that comes up as they're spraying it off, it's deposited all over the place. It's really, really messy and dirty. That overspray is filled with the residue from your bottom paint. I'm going to reiterate, the dust is extremely messy. If you're going this route of soda blasting or sandblasting, it's probably because you have years of bottom paint on that you want removed. And when the bottom is blasted, bottom paint-filled spray will spray up onto your top sides and deck. Cleanup is a whole lot easier before that residue has had time to dry, but you can't just clean it up even if you do it right away with just a hose. You're going to have to use a little bit more elbow grease than just running water. And if your gel coat is chalky, the stain potential, in my opinion, is quite high. So be aware of that. In an ideal world, you'll get to observe the blaster before you have it done to your boat, but in case not, one question to ask the yard or the blaster is, so what's the protocol for protecting my boat? And what's your protocol for protecting the boats around me? Because if the blasters don't do anything, and there certainly are blasters who feel either that it's on you to protect it or they're buying into their hype that there's nothing that's sprayed anywhere, everything is very contained. Other people who we've seen, they'll kind of do almost a canvas tent around, so the bottom line of your boat, and they'll bring canvas down to the ground so that all of the mess is contained. I can't imagine what the blaster looks like inside there, but everything is contained at least within one space. There still will be dust that will come out, but at least it won't go either super high on your boat or onto other boats. But ask the blaster or the yard what the protocol is for protection. Because if there is no protection, that's just something that you need to take into consideration, both for your boat and also for your neighbors. Because if the blaster isn't doing anything to protect boats around you, you would do well as a boatyard neighbor to be a proactive, helpful boatyard neighbor. And using permission, ask permission before you walk on board, obviously, at least it should be obvious. Drape plastic or tarps or something to minimize the dust. Again, it's not that it's going to damage the top sides, but it will make a really big mess on a boat that is downwind of where you happen to be spraying. Otherwise, plan on spending time cleaning your neighboring boats. Really, seriously, either using that hose and using the soft deck brush, getting up on deck and cleaning this stuff around there. So make sure that you're being a good neighbor. How do you get your boat ready to be bottom blasted? Well, you're going to make sure that anything that you have around your boat and around the stands, that's gone. A strong suggestion is to make sure that your through hulls are all closed. And in addition to closing them from the inside, plug them from the outside with something, even if it's just paper towels or some kind of towel thing that you can then pull out. The more dust you can keep from going into the boat or into those through hulls, the better. I would strongly suggest and recommend being there while the work is being done, not because you are overseeing the work that they're doing, but because then you can clean up the mess much more quickly and easily if you do it right after the work has been done. And one last thing to unfortunately be aware of is that even if you have a fantastic blaster who does a great job taking care of things and protects your boat and protects your neighbor boats so you don't have hours of cleanup to do afterwards, you still haven't dodged the sanding requirement completely. The blasting will remove a lot of the paint, but it won't take everything off. There will be parts along the keel. There will be parts along the waterline that will not have been touched. And if you are in a boatyard and the blasting is being done on a time when the boatyard workers aren't there, you will have parts behind the stands that will not have been touched at all. So, unfortunately, even though you've saved weeks of work of standing with a sander over your head, you haven't dodged the sanding requirement completely. Blasting the bottom, thank goodness, is not an every year proposition. It's not particularly cheap. It does take off a lot of material, and it's a whole lot more work than you'd think. Not only with the cleaning of your own boat, cleaning of neighbor boats, if you have to do that, but also just what happens when you're all done with it, when it's all finished and you're still left with a bottom that you need to finish getting the little bits and pieces cleaned of. But that said, I'd much rather sandblast than be dealing with trying to take the bottom paint off in some other fashion. Luckily, though, we shouldn't have to do this for a long time to come. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you when neither one of us is in a boatyard and neither one of us is currently having our bottoms blasted, and we just get to toast to the incredible life that we're both getting to live. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends, and we love it when you don't forget to subscribe. Have the most fantastic week.